All right, I'm here with Steve at Alltech Brewing, and we're standing here with a pallet with the ingredients used to make bourbon. Now, of course, for the rye whiskey, they would use rye grain instead, and a few of these percentages of things would be different. But we're going to go to Ethan here to talk to him about what is in this pallet and where it comes from.
Okay, so Steve, what exactly is on the pallet and where does it come from?
Well, this is a pallet of grain that's ready for us to use in our, we actually start our products in our brew house. And this has corn and rye grain and also barley grain on it. Again, this is a bourbon pallet, and for rye whiskey, we would have 55% rye, 30% corn, and 15% barley. So it'd be a little bit different percentage than what you'd see on this pallet right now. The grain comes, so the rye would come from Germany, and the corn is from Kentucky or in the Indiana area, and then the barley comes from Cargill in Minnesota in the Midwest.
All right, we're gonna go over to the barrels in a minute and talk about those. All right, so Steve, we're here with some barrels in this big contraption. What is this thing?
That's our receiving tank. So in the next room, we're distilling bourbon spirits, and then we move it over here to this spirits receiving tank. And we're going to use that tank to fill these bourbon barrels with that bourbon spirits. The bourbon barrels come from Independent Stave Company. They're charred white oak barrels. The char is like a 3 or 4 char, which means the depth of the char. So the bourbon goes in there and it's aged for 4 or 5 years. Now the other products we make, the rye whiskey and also the Pierce Lines Reserve, which is 100% malted barley whiskey, we put those in barrels that have been used to age bourbon for 4 or 5 years. And we take the bourbon out and then we'll put the rye whiskey or the PLR Reserve into those barrels for 4 to 5 years.
Okay. All right, so now, Steve, these aren't white oak barrels. What type of barrels are these?
These are Spanish oak barrels that we've brought in to finish some bourbon in as kind of an experiment. So we have Town Branch bourbon that's been aged 4 or 5 years in a bourbon barrel, that charred white oak barrel. And then we bring it and take it out of that barrel and put it into this Spanish oak sherry cask to pick up some of those flavors from the sherry that was in that aging in that cask beforehand.
Similar to your bourbon barrel, correct?
Similar to what we're doing with bourbon barrel ale. We take our bourbon barrels, they're freshly decanted, the bourbon's out of them, and we put the beer in there. So this is like the reverse of that. We're taking the bourbon and finishing it. We followed all the rules for bourbon, and then finishing in a sherry cask.
Okay. All right, so Steve, we've got these big stills behind us here. Now, what are these made of exactly?
These are dual copper pot stills. They're imported from Scotland. So that copper is very malleable and transfers the heat, the steam heat that's used in the distilling process.
Okay. And after all the processing, and we've seen in the other room, the aging process and all that, we actually brought the product. Now, what's different from bottle to bottle?
These bottles were chosen by Dr. Lyons' wife, Deidre. All 3 come from France. So it's a very heavy glass that we're using there for the Pierce Lines Reserve, and then the Town Branch bourbon, and then the Town Branch rye whiskey.
All right, thanks a lot, Steve.
Thank you.